So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Junior Achievement Business Hall of Fame. Today, we have a wonderful panel put together that's going to talk on the topic of the purpose in business. Today, joining us, we have Aaron Hurst, who's the CEO and co founder of Imperative. And Imperative is the foremost expert on the science of purpose and fulfillment at work. Imperative is a peer coaching platform that uses the power of peers to support each other over time to become increasingly effective and fulfilled. And in 2014, Aaron brought global awareness to the rise of the fourth economic era in history, the purpose economy. Thanks for joining us today.
Awesome.
We also are super excited to have Dan Price here. Dan was raised in rural Idaho. He founded Gravity Payments from his Seattle Pacific University dorm room at 19 years old. And then Dan built his Seattle-based credit card processing company on the values of honesty and transparency instilled in him during his rural upbringing. And furthermore, Dan's decision to raise his company's minimum salary to $70,000 a year in 2015 captured national and global headlines and inspired other organizations worldwide. Dan's leadership and entrepreneurship have earned him many accolades and awards, notably Entrepreneur Magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year in 2014 and the 2010 SBA National Young Entrepreneur of the Year awarded to him by President Obama. Thanks for joining us today, Dan. And lastly, we have Christie Corey, who's a cybersecurity service consultant at KPMG. She's been working there for nearly 3 years. And Christie obtained her bachelor's in business from the University of Washington and her master's in science and information management from Syracuse University. Christie's absolute favorite day in school growing up was the Junior Achievement Day. And she was thrilled to hear about KPMG's involvement in such an important organization to her. She's involved in the Women in Cyber group at KPMG, promoting intersectional diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Thank you, Christie, for joining us today. At Junior Achievement, we define our purpose in business as our mission of giving people the knowledge, young people, students K through 12, the knowledge and skills that they need to own their economic success and really make smart academic choices to determine what their future is going to look like. And every organization, defines purpose differently. So I'd just love to start off by getting all of your thoughts on how do you define purpose in your business? Aaron, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, happy to. And I'm excited to be here, and I've loved working with the Junior Achievement over the years in different states. So honored to be here. What I've come to understand is that purpose is much more of a mindset. It's about fundamentally approaching your life, looking to create meaning and to add value and to be fulfilled. And I think the key thing that really brought me there is just recognizing that nothing in and of itself is meaningful. We add the meaning to things. That's how meaning is created. So nothing's purposeful inherently. We have to create that. So at the core, we've had different economic eras in our history as we've evolved as a society. And we started off sort of pre-economic era where we were just like basically cavemen and women, and there were no jobs, there were no businesses, there were no managers, like none of that existed. And then we had an agrarian economy where we started to learn to settle down. We could, raise animals. We started to see the land became of value. So there was land ownership, and there were people who owned land and people who didn't own land. And that was sort of the start of the idea of labor, because those who didn't own land then were, the people who were working or were slaves in a lot of cases around the world with that economic era. And then you move into an industrial economy, which was the second major economy. And that's where we learned how to use raw materials to create goods. We started becoming global. We started having sort of trade in cities, et cetera, as a society. And with that, we started to see the rise of unions. We started to see the rise of a voice for labor. What we moved into next, my uncle at Stanford coined the term information economy, which was the third economic era, where we actually saw information and the packaging and sending and use of information became the primary source of value creation. And that was the first economy. Again, that's where millennials started to play a major role, where we started to see the workforce for the first time truly starting to have more power because they had choice over where they worked for the first time in our economy in a significant way. And again, not everybody, but a larger and larger percentage. And so just saw a shift there. So bring us to the purpose economy, which is the fourth economic era in history, sort of is what I put forward in the book, The Purpose Economy. What we're seeing is that we're seeing a fundamental shift in the paradigm where there's such a shortage for talent that we're starting to see that labor is starting to have more and more ability to define like what it is they want in their workplace. We're seeing that we understand psychology differently. We're seeing women in the workplace for the first time in massive scale and disrupting what we're doing. So all the dynamics are fundamentally shifting in the labor force. And then from a consumer perspective, we're seeing more and more people spending their money on things that are to help them gain meaning and fulfillment in their lives. We're seeing more and more money being spent on things that are about quality of life and psychological well-being. And we're seeing a lot of innovation and disruption to industries that are around giving people more autonomy and ownership of their careers. So as I think about, your audience here today and businesses, I think this is an opportunity to innovate. I think about someone who's early in the information economy in Silicon Valley. There were the companies that said, oh, we're in the information economy, I better build a website, right? And those companies generally went under. It was the ones that said, we are fundamentally an information economy. We have to redesign everything we do as an organization to thrive. And I think it's the same thing with the purpose economy, where there's the ones that are saying, let's do some volunteering. And like, that's enough. And there's the ones that are realizing like, no, this changes every single aspect of how we have to show up as a company to our customers, to our employees, that we need to treat everyone as actual human beings. I believe strongly the companies that are going to be around and thriving 10 years from now are the ones that fully embrace that and don't just do lip service to it. So I just challenge everyone, it's part of the organization to think about what is the role you're playing in there and how do you make that jump?
So Dan, I'm just curious, was purpose part of your, goal and mission when you made that bold decision, so many years ago that kind of catapulted you to international stardom? Was purpose part of that?
The employees at Gravity got together over a long weekend one time and worked really hard and asked themselves, like, what did they want our purpose to be together? And what they came up with was that they wanted us to stick up for the little guy. And that's always how we've done things, because the inspiration for the company was a small coffee shop in Idaho called Moxie Java, and the owner, Heather Hempel, and how we were seeing how, she was basically being bullied and taken advantage of. For us, we find a lot of meaning in trying to fight back against that. And so initially when we started the company, the whole thing was about all of us together sacrificing to be able to help those small businesses in that way. And the way that the employees chose to capture that is that we stick up for the little guy. What people know me for is two things, and know us for is two things. One is the $70,000 minimum wage and having like a pay scale that, fairly compensates people, regardless of even if the market's not fair. Like, we don't follow the market. And then number two, the way that we speak out, on behalf of small businesses. And so, I think that those were two things that I didn't do. They were not part of the company until, that group of employees went away and really defined that. And I think for us, it makes going to work more fun and more meaningful than it would be if we didn't have that.
That's great. Thank you. And Christie, from your perspective, I touched a little bit in your bio around, your choice of where you wanted to work, really centered a lot around the purpose that organization, that business had. Can you speak to that a little bit and how purpose in business has helped guide your career choice and professional path?
Yeah, definitely. I can speak on the perspective maybe as a recently graduated student, or it's not that recent anymore, I guess. But when you are in school and you're so focused on your coursework, and it comes time to think about post graduation, you have so many opportunities, especially thankfully in the Seattle area, that are in front of you. And it was hard to differentiate, company per company. What I was looking for was some kind of sign that there was a company that I should be at. And it's definitely hard to find, but if you keep your eye on it, an eye for it, you can try to find a sign that tells you that you're potentially on the right path. So when I was interviewing with KPMG and I asked them about their values of, what makes KPMG different than the others? What do they do outside of work as an organization? And they had spoken about their involvement with the community, and they mentioned, they're like, oh yeah, there's something called Junior Achievement that we're a part of. And I was like, Junior Achievement, JA Day. Oh my gosh. I remember being so happy during the interview process, knowing that there was a company that I could be a part of that was involved with Junior Achievement, because that would give me the chance to potentially be a part of JA Day as well for, future kiddos. So finding that alignment of my personal purpose of, reaching out to the community, finding a way to give back in any little way that we can. Seeing that KPMG had prioritized JA Day was absolutely the sign for me that I needed to work for KPMG.
That's wonderful. And of course, it warms my heart to hear that. I appreciate that. And I think it's a great segue into, the next question that I have for you all is really around, besides pay, what are other considerations that you all think, our future workforce or really anyone is looking at and considering when deciding which company they're going to work for or starting at a new company or even changing careers? And how does this relate to the concept of purpose in business? So what are some of those things that you've seen? And again, how it relates to purpose in business? And Aaron, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. I think it's changed a lot over the last decade. I think one thing is brand really matters. I think especially with the rise of social media, people are much more aware of the brands they associate with. And there's nothing you consume more than like where you work. So I think for a lot of the, especially, younger folks, but frankly, I think just about everybody is like very conscious of like wanting to be able to work somewhere they're proud of and that they are proud to associate with. They want to be compensated fairly. And for them, they have their definition of what that means. Everyone defines that somewhat differently. And then, what we've seen in the research is it comes down to sort of three core variables that really matter. The first is relationships. People want to work somewhere where they have authentic relationships, where they can show up as their true self. They can be vulnerable. They can feel supported. They feel like their coworkers are friends. They're not just human resources that they're interacting with. So that's really critical and probably the most important. And the data shows people, when they have friends somewhere, stay. The second is impact. They want to feel like their work actually matters to them, that they can actually trace the impact of their effort to doing something for someone else that's meaningful. It doesn't have to be, again, changing the world, but they need to feel like their work actually does something that matters to them. And then growth. People want to be challenged. People want to be continuously growing. So knowing that they're going to be challenged, it's not always just about promotion. I think that's sort of the old model for it, but really just feeling like they were going to get pushed to grow, to have to do things that scare them a little bit, to be put in new situations. That makes a big difference. So we call that RIG, relationships, impact, and growth. And those are the things that really drive fulfillment at work.
Do you think, Dan, that that's why your decision was somewhat controversial, around the 70,000 salary? Do you think because, as we all know, it's gotten so much publicity and notice, and what are the, positive and negative responses that you've seen from it?
What was said was, Rush Limbaugh came out and said that this is dangerous and this is socialism, quote unquote. And it would be a case study in MBA programs for how socialism does not work because it's going to fail. Prominent TV news network came out and said that my employees would, quote unquote, be on the breadlines because of this decision and that we would destroy the company. So clearly it touched a nerve, but some of those same people then, when it worked 5 years later, hailed it as a victory for capitalism and free markets and showing how that's the solution. But if you just zoom out or look at statistics rather than anecdotes, I think that it just misses the whole point. And I think my decision and the way it was used in the national narrative was dangerous and does miss the point, because I think it perpetuates the myth of fairness, meritocracy, equality of opportunity that does not exist and has never existed. It was one of those things where, look, we proved that it can work because we tripled in size, we cut our employee turnover in half, and everybody's lives got a lot better. But we also proved that it doesn't work systemically because income and wealth inequality got worse. The transfer of wealth from workers to corporations and billionaires got worse, and 0 big companies followed suit. So I think that's why it should have been controversial, but it was more controversial in the margins of, just the pettiness of people saying they don't want to pay somebody who answers customer service phone calls enough to raise a family. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's what hypocrites we are in our system and the way it's set up, because, we said that we have essential workers and we gave all sorts of lip service. And at the same time, we used all these political maneuvers to make sure that those people won't make a living wage despite being in a very dangerous and trying situation for all of us. And yes, they were kind of coerced or forced to do that. But the idea that we will express so much wonderful appreciation for them and not pay them enough to literally live. I'm not talking about thrive. I'm talking about literally live. I think that's the real controversy here.
I mean, first of all, I love, Dan, what you did in terms of starting that conversation and treating your team that way. I found what you're saying is absolutely true. There's nothing there that I would refute. I think the key thing I've looked at is trying to figure out what actually changes behavior and what could change behavior. And a lot of this is based on just classism, just like through and through. And what I found with executives and even like lovely people, have dinner with them, they have a very strong us and them mindset that they don't even realize they have, that there are humans and there's sort of like subhumans. And there's this fundamental mindset around that. It's all tied back to sort of the origins of the corporation and organizations and how they frame labor, including slavery. And we're still fundamentally on a paradigm where it's like human resources, right? And I challenged the head of SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management. I said, when you tuck your grandchild into bed every night, do you say, honey, I hope one day you grow up to be a beautiful human resource, right? Like they just completely have dehumanized work. So the challenge that, and I'm not saying, I loved your point about what people say versus what they do, but the challenge I put to people is as an executive, is to think about, are there jobs in your company that you would not have your kids take? And you would not be proud for your kids to do that. And if you have any, like you're morally lacking integrity. Every single job that you create in your business should be one that you'd be happy to have your kids take, to be proud of and feel like they could support themselves in that. And if you're okay with someone else's kid taking it and not for your own, like you need to sort of take a step back and just think about why your kids are more valuable than someone else's and what that fundamentally means about like how your values are showing up in the world. And I think if every company and every CEO sat down and did an audit and said, okay, I got 3 kids, let's go through every job in our company and decide which of those my kids are going to take and which ones are not. And anyone that's not, we have to completely redesign how that work gets done. We would see a major shift. But I feel like it has to be at that kind of personal values level. I think the political system and the economic system, is so wildly corrupt. And the actual definition of corruption is believing the rules don't apply to you. And I think that's what's happened is these executives have sort of come to believe that the rules don't apply to them. And there's sort of the rules for them and the rules for everybody else. I wrote an article for Stanford sort of with the idea of net present value of impact. So we think about net present value of $1, but there's also net present value of impact, right? So I know helping a kid now versus helping them like later on when they're in prison, much bigger impact, right? I know that stopping that train with 10 miles of track left is a lot easier than when there's 10 yards of track left, right?
My background is in early childhood education, and it's that entire belief of the earlier you can have the impact on both the child and even new parents, the better the trajectory and outcome can be. So I think that that's also our belief at Junior Achievement of really why we start our programming in kindergarten, to really start kids at 5 years old, understanding needs versus wants and what savings is, and even the concept of money and trying to demystify money, especially in today's day and age when everything, there isn't money anymore. It's all electronic, or you put your phone on something and, it's the same device that you're playing video games on, and really trying to make them understand, the concepts of money and then starting, as they get older to really thinking about, their passion and how they can integrate their passion, their personal passions in a professional, career as well. Christie, you alluded to it a little bit earlier. Well, that was such a big part of what your decision to join KPMG and to start your career there was really because of their focus around giving back to the community. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
People in my generation now have made it a demand that corporations are responding to things that are happening worldwide. So especially now with COVID and all of the other events that have happened in the past year, we're assessing our companies not just on how they treat us, but how they're responding to these events. And I know so many individuals who have actually left their companies and moved to somewhere else because they felt like their community response or how they responded to teams or just the general environment that they were providing in a pandemic and all of these other events were subpar. I used this analogy earlier this morning that there's a lot of band-aids being put on absolute waterfalls. And so in terms of, there's a lot of companies that may see that there are individuals in the younger generation that are demanding, action and justice for certain events that are happening worldwide. And they might throw a buzzword here and there, might do a social media campaign here and there. But at the end of the day, there's a much deeper root cause and a long, long journey before an actual solution is found. And so, I can personally speak that there's been plenty of events where I don't feel like companies are responding in a appropriate way. It's hard to distinguish whether a company truly cares about a matter, truly cares about what their employees care about, or whether or not they're just trying to appear good in the market so that way their value doesn't get, descored or whatever you'd like to say. So it's great that there's employees, in my generation now that are able to distinguish between genuine acts of integrity and caring for a community versus potentially a buzzword competition. I had a really similar conversation last week with a few individuals in the Women in Cyber group, and I made a point. We were discussing the idea that courage and integrity and doing something about something you care about, if it's something that you truly care about, you should not wait for management or anybody else to push you to do something. Thankfully, we're all capable humans. We were hired in this company and we have a voice. And if you feel like you work for a company where your voice wouldn't be appreciated or heard to create action, then it's going to motivate you to look elsewhere. But I think the days of waiting for a campaign to come top down should be, are no longer. And it's really up to the staff, the majority, to bring a voice to what is important to them.
So again, thinking about students and, supporting them on their path forward, Erin, what advice and insight do you think that high school students can hear today around preparing themselves to really attain their purpose in business?
I think a lot of it's just about self-awareness and recognizing that the same things that give you meaning in school are the things that can give you meaning at work. They're not totally separate, right? And we go back to the things that bring meaning to you, relationships. What are you doing to build relationships and invest in people and to help people feel seen, to help people feel appreciated, and to have really authentic connections? How are you making an impact at school? Not just in your schoolwork, but how are you helping others? Are you volunteering? Are you helping classmates? Are you helping the school? What are you doing to feel like you're actually making an impact? And then growth. What do you actually want to learn? Not necessarily just what the teachers want to teach you, but what do you actually want to learn and to take ownership of it? And if you can build those three muscles and start to create that for yourself, when you start going into an interview and they ask you, what are you all about? What do you like? You can be, I love building relationships. Let me tell you about these 4 relationships. I love making an impact. Let me tell you about how the impact, I love to grow. Here's how I've grown. And then they're like, well, what are you looking for? And you're like, I want a job where I can build great relationships, make an impact and growth. And 9 out of 10 employers would be like, boom, here's your offer. That's what people want, is that kind of self-awareness and ownership about what drives you and your intrinsic motivations.
And following up on that, what do you think that would mean for the future of business, right? If we could cultivate support and help grow, a generation of leaders, flexing those 3 muscles, right? Having worked on them and toned them over the years, what would business look like? How would it change the what business is as we know it today?
I think it would lead to much happier people with a greater abundance mindset, which would enable companies, I think, to be more courageous, to be able to innovate a lot more, to be a lot more socially responsible more broadly, just by having people that truly care about each other and have true connections and are looking to make an impact. And then I think most broadly, it would change the definition of work in our culture for companies, where we move away from this idea of work as a financial transaction to the idea of the nobility and importance of each person. And with that, we could start moving away from, I think, a lot of the classism we have in the business world and in work, and start to address some of these more systemic issues. But on a pure bottom line short-term standpoint, I think having employees who know who they are employees are going to perform better than anybody else. Employees that operate out of fear are lower performers, and they cause trouble for everybody around them. So being able to develop a workforce of people who operate out of abundance and out of self-awareness, those are your dream people to have on a team.
Well, thank you all for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I would just want to give, each of you an opportunity just for final thoughts, to advice for our students that are watching and thinking about their future and thinking about, purpose in business and opportunities around entrepreneurship and how business can positively contribute to society.
Your purpose is going to be redefined on a continuous basis, whether it be yearly, monthly, maybe tomorrow something will happen and your purpose will completely be redefined. And so it's important, as Erin mentioned, to be self-aware and also be self-accountable and understand that, when you do identify what is important to you, you can hold yourself accountable to say, what am I doing to show that it is important to me? So, for me personally, if I can say that, supporting the future generation is important to me, how can I do that in my workplace? If supporting women in STEM is important to me, how can I do that outside of the workplace? And so, encouraging people to continuously think about what's important to them and trying to find that within their everyday, and also just not being so hard on themselves. And that, I think everyone has so much pressure on themselves to be absolutely amazing. And you can see all these LinkedIn posts and Instagram posts of someone getting the new internship or the job or whatever it be, and understanding that there's a timing for everything, and just to, keep trying your best for everything, I guess.
Thank you, Christie. You're very impressive. Dan, you want to follow that up and give some advice to students watching?
Not an easy one to follow, but I'll do my best. I mean, I think my advice would be to take care of your health and your well-being, and do everything that you can to invest in your closest relationships and be authentic. Don't be somebody that you think you need to be for those close relationships, because close relationships are meant to support you in who you really are truly deep down. And so I think the best advice I could give to the high schoolers out there, to anybody out there, would be to prioritize your own health and well-being, and then prioritize improving or helping the people around you that you care about and everybody that you can.
Bravo. And Erin, final thoughts?
I think my advice to high school students around the 3 C's. So be curious about yourself, be curious about other people, be curious about the world. Just be constantly looking for new ways to learn and to connect. Be compassionate. Understand that everyone has their own journey and their own situation, and that everyone's doing the best they can, and all you can do is help them sort of be the best version of themselves that they can be. And the third is courage, which is, I think, especially in this world right now, something that's, it's not easy to do, is to be courageous. And to be courageous is about what's courageous for you. It's not about what's courageous for someone else. It's leaning into your fear. It's being able to stand up for what you believe in, even if others don't, and being able to challenge the status quo. And I think if you follow those 3 C's of curiosity, courage, and compassion, you're in pretty good shape. And it's an alliteration, and all alliterations are true. So
thank you so much for doing this and for supporting our work and our mission at JA. We really appreciate you taking the time, and I've enjoyed the time that we've had together.
Thank you so much for the work you do. Really make us all a more educated, more capable society. So thanks for doing that. And Christie and Erin, really nice doing this with both of you. I appreciated hearing both your perspectives. So
likewise.
Nice being here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.